Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining. My name is Gabe Pyle, Program Director for the Industrial and Innovative Design Program at the International Center for Creativity. I'm here with another one of my grads to hear his story. This grad is Will Haskins, and he graduated pretty recently, but it still has an incredible story. I can't wait to get into it. So, Will, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What year you graduated and what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I graduated in 2020 in the middle of COVID or right at the beginning. I started looking for jobs. I was pretty location specific. So I wanted to go to North Carolina. I had family, and my wife at the time was looking for some school there. And so I was pretty picky. I knew that a lot of opportunities were available elsewhere if I chose to, but I felt like I wanted to prioritize being near family more than anything else, which I knew could be costly in terms of the specific opportunities available. I went home for about a year because of COVID. So I lived with my parents and I worked as a janitor in a church and spent a lot of time just talking with people, hanging out, trying to look for jobs. The final job that I ended up getting, I I believe I applied on just Indeed or kind of a random website. It wasn't anything that felt special or there wasn't a big connection with it. It was just applying for a lot of different jobs. And actually, when I applied, it was an engineering job, and I didn't have the necessary specs for it, which I already kind of knew going in. But I was like, well, nothing to lose. I might as well kind of broaden my specs and look at whatever I can get. And I went into the interview, and I feel like I interview pretty well. People normally, I don't know, take a decent liking to me and feel like I'm a nice person. So like
Yeah, I
I
can agree with that. Yeah.
I feel like I did pretty well in the interview, but I knew that I was probably missing some of the things they were looking for.
Mhm.
And so I got a call back like the next week after, and they said, you know what? We think we have someone else for that role that is a better fit, but we like you, so we want to offer you a job. We don't know what the job is, though. Would you accept that? And I was like, yeah, I want a job. Like, what, what does that look like? And they're
Yes.
like, well, I don't know. We maybe have something to do with sales, and like you might be like the go between the engineers and the sales people. And I was like, sure, I don't like sales. That sounds kind of awful. But like it's a job and it was in the area, and I was like, I think there's enough opening here that I can kind of figure out, and I can make inroads in the ways that I want to, and hopefully push some of these skills that maybe people don't recognize up front, because sometimes with industrial design it's a little bit of a gray area for people where they understand, okay, salesperson, really easy to track with, engineer, really easy to track with, industrial, what? And it's like, maybe you'll fit. I don't know, you seem nice. And so they kind of put me in something. And within the first month, I had gotten put in charge of designing the concepts for what are point of sale mobile devices. So think of Chick-fil-A, people walking through the line with an iPad or an iPhone, or if you're in a Starbucks and you're walking in and when you get to the checkout line, they don't have a typical like laptop or computer or something like that. They have an iPad that's resting in a permanent stand. That's what the company does. And so their original process was the CEO and founder of the company would just brainstorm an idea, and he would just say, oh, I'm just going to draw this, or I'm going to make it really roughly in CAD. And then he would hand it right to an engineer. And so they had about six engineers that time, and each one had their own style. And so you would see that in the products where it's like, oh, Sadeep did this one. You can tell because of these shapes, he likes this kind of radius or that kind of style.
Mm.
And so my job was kind of coming in between them and then being that funnel. So the CEO would come over to me and say, hey, or a salesperson would come over and say, hey, we have a company that's looking for this certain kind of chip reader that we don't make something for. Could you draw something up real quick? And then once I was done with it, I would hand it over to an engineer and they would actually make it ready for manufacturing. So that was my first job. I wore a lot of hats because it was a pretty small company. So it was really something where whatever you want to accept, we we'll give you that responsibility. So I helped with trade show visuals and planning. I did graphic design for both their social media as well as um, packaging. I also helped to engineer some of the packaging. So thinking of like pulp molds or folding cardboard and working on that, as well as the visuals for the outside. Also just rendering. So in addition to doing the product creation at the beginning of the process, I would also come back at the end once it was fully engineered and do the renders for their website because they did have a photographer, but it was a mixed bag between most times photography was for real world scenarios where you're using people.
Hmm.
But if it's just the product on its own, then we would do a render because it was faster, or we could do different revisions or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my that was my first position.
So wearing many hats, it sounds like you were, as many industrial designers are, a jack of all trades at this company, or or a design Swiss Army knife, whatever they needed.
Yes.
You figured out how to do it.
Yes. Yeah, I like learning a lot of stuff. And so anytime there's an opening for figuring out some kind of new like broader skill set or even just a different program, we switched at that company 3 times between different CAD programs. So we started at SolidWorks and then we briefly jumped over into Fusion. Onshape is the one that we finished with. There was some adjustment period, but it's something that if you go to a next company and they use one of the other ones, then you're like, great, I've used that before, and it's a skill set I have now.
It sounded like you were using some other softwares as well. What other softwares were you using in your day to day?
Yeah, used a lot of Adobe Suite, a lot of Photoshop, a lot of Illustrator, a lot of InDesign. Most times InDesign was for sales sheets, Illustrator was for packaging, and then Photoshop was for anything else that I was having to do with adjusting photos or renders or anything like that. I used Keyshot. I feel like most places that I've worked have either already had Keyshot or have been flexible enough that when they ask what I'm used to, and I
Hmm.
say Keyshot, Onshape, whatever else, they're like, cool, we'll buy it. And then they just use that.
Yeah.
I haven't yet joined a team where they've been so strict where they're like, we only use this and we're never going to change. It's more of like, oh, that sounds interesting. Is that better? And why? And then if you say yes, then they're like, cool, we'll make check it out and see if we want to transfer over anyway. So
So you were at Vault. You were at Vault designing these point of sale devices. Where did you go after that?
yeah, so I worked there for I think just over 4 years. And the company ended up laying off about a third of the force around the time when tariffs starting hitting. After getting laid off, I stuck around in North Carolina and just decided to look for more work. Originally, I was looking for work in industrial design, but as happens with COVID or bunches of tariffs, then there's a lot of other industrial designers who are also getting laid off at the same time.
Yeah.
And since I wasn't particularly looking for other work super hard around that time, then I didn't have a whole lot that I found. There's I think I realized over time that there are some big pockets of where industrial design lives in the US, and North Carolina isn't really one of those.
Hmm.
And so looked around, and eventually my process of getting a job actually ended up with me starting my own projects. I felt like I was hitting some dead ends by just kind of praying and praying, applying to different places and not hearing much back. And I felt like I had seen at least 3 other designers who had, within a couple months of each other, all announced they were doing their own individual studio, whatever. They were going to kind of use that as their avenue for doing their own work, contract or whatever other means.
Yeah.
And then a couple months after they announced those different things, they joined a different company. And I was like, I couldn't tell if it was just coincidence or if it was like, okay, it's a strategy. It's getting yourself out there. It's another way of advertising. I'm serious about this kind of work. This is a way of showing what I can do and showing that I'm still active and I'm almost going to keep doing something no matter whether someone has yet hired me. So I decided to do something similar. I started kind of building a different website that was separate from my own portfolio site. And I came up with branding, a name, and visuals and stuff like that. I did start working on a couple different projects that I did carry through that Halo design kind of label or whatever.
Yeah.
But then pretty quickly after I launched that, then I did get two interview opportunities after that. I don't know if it was because of that or not. I never heard if that was why,
Yeah.
but it felt like maybe some traffic got generated and brought people in. Interestingly, this was a little different than my first job. My first job, I just interviewed or I just applied to a bunch of different places, eventually got an interview through Indeed. With this application, I got contacted by two separate recruiters who had just seen my profile and messaged me through LinkedIn. One of the jobs was an engineering job, like a straight no industrial design, just engineering. And then the other one was a marketing position, which is the position that I eventually decided to go with. The I think the company fit was better for me. There was a distinct difference in the type of communication I was getting one from another. One felt like a company that wanted to have me and would reach out, was very good about openly communicating and sticking to times. So like if I set up an interview time, they would be there when the interview started. Whereas the other company was a little off. Communication felt awkward and stilted, where it, it always felt like we were talking for the first time every time we would talk.
Hmm.
And it, so almost just based off the gut feeling, even though there were some really attractive things about the other company, I decided to go with a marketing opportunity. And I definitely have not regretted it. So I would just say, like, at least from my experience, the like if the vibes are off, then like avoid it,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes. Vibes are a credible way to gauge if something is going to be good or not. God expresses his
Yeah.
will and points you in the right direction with lots of different signposts. Obviously, the Holy Spirit is nudging you, the scripture, wisdom from friends. But
Yeah.
sometimes the vibes are just off. And that's one of the ways he says, yeah, that's not right. I don't want you there.
Yeah. 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 So the place that I'm working at now is called Icon Protection.
Hmm.
It's a parent company to three smaller companies, which are all in the renovation safety equipment, is one way of saying it. Another way would be surface protection. So a lot of times, if people are doing renovations in kitchens, this could be either individuals, contractors, or large scale renovations. There's
Hmm.
some kind of aspects of the existing architecture that needs to be protected. And so, whether it's flooring that you want to lay down cardboard rolls over, or certain kinds of plastic, or a construction site where they need an entryway mat that needs to prevent dirt from getting tracked in, or a
Hmm.
painting job site where you can't have dust on the site because it's going to settle and people are doing like cutting boards and there's sawdust flying around and you need to have some kind of protection, then that's what they make right now. And so they're sold in Lowe's, Home Depot, Sherwin-Williams, those kinds of stores. So yeah, right now I'm working, my title is multimedia designer. So it's a slight shift from my first title, which was just straight industrial designer. But that's partly because I'm doing less product design and I'm doing more a mix between video, product rendering, and graphic design slash like packaging design. So that's currently what I'm doing.
You mentioned showing off your work with this other website so that people could see you so that you could stay busy. Can you show us some of the stuff you've been working on?
Yeah, sure. This is a snippet of work from my time at Vault. As we said, I did a lot of varied things. Basically, anytime anyone would have something that was a visual demand, that someone needed to see something in some way, they would probably ask me, and I would normally say yes, just for the sake of being able to do something new and interesting. And then also, you gain a lot of trust with people when you help them out. They will come back to you for a bunch of different stuff and a lot of times it opens up doors into cool new things that you might not expect. So one of the things that I got asked to do was um, trade show visualization. I'd never done that before. Um, didn't really have a didn't have a process, so I just kind of started sketching in Procreate and saying, okay, how big is the booth? Estimating visually, saying what kind of tables are going to maybe be there. And that changed over time. Originally, they were going to buy new tables and then they used stuff they already had. But I was able to plan some of the backdrops and then design the backdrop that eventually made it to the show. And that was actually the first trade show that I went to myself. So I was able to man the booth that I helped make, which was a cool experience. We also, when I was at Vault, we worked as a design contractor as well. So we did our own products, and then we also would work with other point of sale companies to manufacture packaging or individual products. One of those was the packaging for a company called Boulevard. They already had an existing card reader case that they had sold, and they wanted to make an updated version. So I designed the modified version. So it was basically swapping out from one card reader to a newer, different card reader, but keeping a similar style to the casing. So I designed that, and then they also needed to upgrade the packaging, change some QR codes, change a bit of the layout. Some of the branding had changed. So I modeled up the packaging in Onshape at that point and did renders for them, did some instructions as well, and um, then got to see the real product and take some photos of it after. I did some motion design as well. So Vault did some mixture between motion graphics and real life video. So like this render I did in Keyshot, and then some of the other more like stills were just images that were then taken in After Effects and adjusted after the fact. But I worked with one of the contract videographers at Vault to figure out the shot layout and the plan to have an actual idea of what the end result was going to look like, doing some storyboarding and stuff because his shots, he already probably had most of them, but mine were going to be baking for a couple days. And you don't want to bake something and then have someone come back and be like, actually, I don't think that's it. Let's do a different concept entirely. Maybe shift the lighting. Should this be in like a different location? You're like, no, no. I want to get it first right in the storyboard phase, and then when I show you something, yeah, maybe could you remove a light so there isn't a glare on the iPad in this frame or something? Yes, that's totally fine. But that's always been really valuable when doing motion stuff is getting stuff approved, having some kind of signature of yes, this person has seen it and they like it. This is a good avenue to go down before doing all of the work on something.
And that storyboard, that looks like it's just a Procreate document.
Yep. I use Procreate for a lot of stuff. Anytime there is a need to sketch something down and you want to be able to share it with people later, instead
Mhm.
of drawing it physically and then taking a photo and then sending it in a message, I would just draw it in Procreate. Because also half the time we'd be in a meeting and people would be curious what I was drawing or what I was talking about. And so being able to just plug in and display it on a screen so everyone knows what you're talking about is way easier than doing something, showing people, doing something, showing people, anything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and then you can kind of have conversations and edits on the fly too. So if they say, "Hey, what does it look like if we did this instead?" and it's just so much faster that way.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, no surprise to me that you are putting the iPad to the its best and highest and possible use because I still reference your modeling and rendering for your capstone have that you only had an iPad and the
Yeah.
students see your work and their mouths drop. I'm like, yeah, so you can do good work on a computer if this guy can do this on the iPad. They're like, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. That's still something where I look back and I was like, it probably would have been better if I used a computer, but all the same, it's fine. I got the experience.
Yes, yeah.
Product design, this is a very cut down version of just a probably second sketch that I did of something, and then the final result on the right. One of the things that I learned a lot when doing product development was exploring all the options and talking to as many different people in the stakeholder chain as possible, because everyone has their own priorities when they're aiming for a product, and people have their own unique things that they pick up on. And so one person might be really glued to the idea that payment has to be on a certain side of the iPad, or it has to be made of a certain material, or that being lightweight is the most important, or something else. And they might all be in a design scope document, but it's the people who are pushing for certain things. And sometimes by exploring more options in the beginning, you find that people gradually shift, and they might adjust from being a champion of lightweight at all costs to being,
Mhm.
actually, this battery idea is genius. This is way more important. We need to do this over everything else. But they wouldn't know that until they see it for a
Mhm.
lot of people. Um, so this was one of the kind of initial sketches for the product, and we shifted from a concept of having a battery be in a certain handle location to being down inside of a lower location inside of a what we called a sled, which is a separate little plug-in that would bridge between the payment device and the iPad.
Mhm.
And there's just a bunch of different evolutions that can happen in that process. So I learned a bunch of different important lessons about product development by exploring a lot of options early on.
Uh, and I say this not negatively, but I've seen your drawing skills, and I know you can draw better than that. But it seems
Oh
like
yeah.
that's the kind of drawing that you need to do to have a conversation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, I I mean, I love drawing, and I really love even like doing realism that might take hours or days or whatever else. Especially personally, I like painting. Like that's my jam. So if I was
Mhm.
going to do something that was highly realistic, that's the avenue I'd go down. But no, conversational drawings, everyone always makes the comment, like a similar comment, because at my current job, I have paintings behind my desk that I've
Mhm.
done, and they're like, "Wow, this is like crazy good," and they're like, and similar kind of comment, like, "I why do you only draw like these little like dinky things?" It's like, if you can tell what it is or can see a structure in something, that's all I'm trying to do. I don't need to do a bunch of shading if it's not needed.
Mhm.
And it I don't want to there's also something of the same reason you don't give a keyshot render the first week into a design project, where
Yes.
it's like, that's not helpful. That's going to be make a salesperson be like, oh, it's done. We're ready. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, none of it's real. There's no PCB. It's not molded. We don't know
Yeah.
what color it's going to be. So yeah, same thing.
I'm encouraged by that, and I don't want you to feel like you need to be defensive at all because students and as prospective students as well, they're worried about their drawing abilities. And truthfully, I'm going to push them to learn how to draw and how to think in perspective because you need to be able to understand those things. But the key is communication. Can you
Yeah.
communicate your ideas? And that's exactly what that drawing is doing. The perspective is good enough. I can see all of the components that are going in there. It did its job, and you saved time. You shouldn't have rendered that. So
Yeah.
that's why I wanted. That's really what I was trying to pull out of that question. Is even if you can draw incredibly, you don't. That's not what the conversation needs at that moment. Sometimes the
Yeah.
conversation needs a quick sketch like that.
Product renders. Personally, I love Keyshot. That's probably my favorite part of doing product design is rendering it. There's something that I almost find endlessly fascinating about making fake things look more real. There's always more layers that you can build into something, adding fingerprints on plastic and stuff that's so granular that in any normal business scenario, you're not going to be doing that. but there still is a tension between using very basic elements and getting them to look close enough to the real thing that you can still use those end images as advertisements or examples or visuals or whatever you need to use them for. Um, so I think that's one thing that I got a lot better
Hmm.
at Vault was finding that line between a fast turnaround time of, okay, we need this tomorrow, and figuring out a composition and getting the textures to look good enough that it reads both as real, but also close enough to the final result that people are not going to be disappointed by something they actually see. Because sometimes you'll think, oh, well, this plastic texture would look better if it was a little more matte. It's like, but is that actually how it looks? Because you don't want to stray too far. If it's not going to look like that, you don't want to give someone a false hope of, oh, this is going to be perfect. It's going to look exactly like this. And then it shows up and like, oh, weird. Why is it so shiny down here? That looks
Yeah.
cheap. I thought it was going to look different. So I think finding that balance of quick turnaround time and hitting the realism is part of what I enjoy that challenge of being
Hmm.
kind of up against the clock there. These are more contextual renders. Another thing that I really enjoy, kind of on the same vein, is doing placing a fake object in a real place.
Hmm.
A lot of times this would happen most pivotally when you're proposing a project that is pretty far along to maybe a new customer or to a stakeholder that needs more reassurance of something. We did different products for like Acura on the left hand side. And the higher up in the chain you get, you might hit more negative feedback. You might be surprised and think, oh, we're totally sold on this. It's like, actually, you sold a middle manager on something and they need to get approval several layers up. So, doing something that sells a vision can also be a lot of fun. And yeah, currently I'm working at Icon Protection. Product renders is one of the main three areas that I do. And this is one that you have to be smart about.
So
You don't want to.
I have to ask. So this is
Yes,
says product renders. These are renders that we're looking at. These are not photos you took of their existing products.
yes, correct. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It gets better over time, partly because you tweak things as you go. These are pretty recent, and so there's a lot of different things that have been tweaked. So the clear plastic wrap that's around them, the board texture that's underneath, the lighting environment
Hmm.
of adding two reflective panels behind each of them so they look like they're on a white background instead of a darker one. Um, yeah, everything evolves over time, but the I think the biggest thing that I've learned from doing probably 500 to 1,000 renders for this company so far is that like you have to build your systems and organize things effectively if you're going to be doing this much. I built I built the back end of like the whole render folder system, and I planned everything out of assets live here, final results live here, the working file lives here. Everything's organized. When keyshot links break, which they always do, because as
Yeah.
soon as you rename a folder system, everything's gone.
Hmm.
Everything is at most 2 clicks away.
Yeah.
So there's no hunting for things because yeah, when you're doing a bunch of things really rapidly, organization is definitely key, especially if you're working with other people who ever have to access the same files.
Yeah.
The company itself has probably 3,500 SKUs of products that are all different, and you're probably doing at least 6 renders of each product.
Hmm.
And that's another thing of standardizing things. I use in like photography words, I use a 50 millimeter setup dead straight on.
Hmm.
I will angle at 35 degrees to the left and then do a top down position that's also 35 degrees difference from the straight on.
Yeah.
And like you just, I have those baked in and you just push them out. It's the same thing for every product unless there's unique things that are particularly demanding or needed for something. But
Yeah.
yeah, having things baked in is helpful. Planograms. That's another thing that I render. I've never heard of it before. It's the arrangement of products on a store shelf. The company I'm with wants to sell high end, wants to sell a vision, wants to remove any barriers that might restrict someone from approving something. If you're selling it to a Lowe's, Sherwin-Williams, Home Depot, big companies that again have lots of levels of management. And so having a really polished visual can help that out a lot. It removes any questions of like, well, what's the color of this? How is it going to look next to this other product? Or is this the right distance? How is this going to actually feel to someone? So again, I tend to stick to 50 mil and just stock angles. I adjust the head height to be like about 6 foot, a little under
Mhm.
6 foot,
Yeah.
just to read as what it'll feel like in an actual store. Everything to get a little more realism to push people to say, yeah, cool. I think that looks good. Again, contextual renders, same kind of deal as my previous work where you're dropping in products that don't exist yet into environments that maybe have examples of previous product, maybe not, all in an effort to again sell a vision. Yeah, make sure that things get signed off quickly and that projects can move forward and aren't going to get a hold up by someone realizing something too late, or could use it alongside other visuals for initial marketing purposes before maybe replacing with photos later on.
So one of the challenges here is that you have to match the lighting environment. You can't use your stock camera angles and light setups that
Yes.
you used. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of feel. It's a lot of just looking. You have a photo to your left of something similar,
Hmm.
and then you either take some educated guesses of where you think a light would be, what it would probably look like, and then you build it in the Keisha environment. I tend to use HDRI environments more than like in model lighting, just
Yeah.
for speed and kind of making it happen fast. But
Hmm.
I think it pulls out enough of the detail to match.
Yeah.
Graphic design, I have been able to work on probably 10 projects so far. At Icon, we're doing a rebrand of one of the sub brands. So Trimaco is moving from a previous design style to a new one.
Hmm.
And so there's like again, probably, a couple thousand products that we're gradually moving through. And at this point, there's a pretty well defined design system that we have going on with different colors and arrangement of text or rules for different scenarios, different types of products. And there's a lot of overlap between good design basics and in graphic design and in product design of
Yeah.
just using good proportion, good color management of where you're deciding to place things. A lot of overlap there. So this is a video that one of the contract videographers that we work with shot, and they had an old outro that was pretty extreme. Ramboard as a brand is meant to be aggressive, but it was almost over the top with explosions and like crazy sound effects. And they wanted to make it a little more serious, update it a little bit. And so I used After Effects to do this, which they wanted something that was real. So I used a combination of free images that I found online of broken up makeup palettes, some dust and dirt effects that I pulled off of free sites,
Hmm.
and a shattering effect that's just one of the standard ones in After Effects to make the combination of all those things. A lot of it is just being resourceful because I didn't want to make a full animation with real physics and a bunch of crazy over the top stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, like short turnaround times and negligible difference in visuals for the end of an ad. Just kind of an example of delivering what you need to deliver and not more than for no reason.
Exactly.
One other side thing that I do is I work contract as a laser engraver. There are a mixture of plastic and metal parts the owl engrave. Mostly it's for the company TN Innovation, which is owned by my wife's dad. And he has a lot of business that he's doing with China. And sometimes they mess up what a part should say. And so he will send me either blanks or other parts to re-laser, and I'll process through a bunch of different parts on my home setup.
Whoa!
Sounds awesome.
My cat's freaking out right now. That's so cool.
Yeah,
does it ever get old?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we already kind of talked through a bit of the Halo design. This was one of the projects that I did for a previous ICC student who's doing his own business. He was looking for an icon for the company to have. So, yeah, this was one of the processes. It was a pretty similar process to a lot of design prompts where you start with a certain goal, you add in the expectations that are going to be coming along with this, and what type of visuals the brand is going to have otherwise, and then baking that into the mark, giving a lot of different options, narrowing into one, and then refining it a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Will, that was all awesome work. I loved seeing it, and you've already talked a little bit about the programs that you use to make it, and we've already said you, like so many other industrial designers, a jack of all trades. And I wouldn't even say for you, master of none, because I think what you set your mind to, you get really good at, and that's something that I really admire and appreciate about you. And it's been cool to see that even after you graduate, you take a job and you say, "What else can I learn?" I hope that the students watching this can take something from that, that they can also feel like they don't have to stop learning, because the world is going to keep changing and you have to continue to change with it. So with the current and future students in mind, Will, I want to ask you, is there anything that you would suggest to them, any wisdom that you would have to offer these students?
Yeah, I think I would encourage students to understand your own priorities first. For myself, I chose to prioritize family and location. I think some students, maybe by default, might just think that wherever they first find a job by applying anywhere is where they need to go. And you definitely don't have to do that. You might find that you have to dig a little deeper to find a job that's going to match up with what you're hoping to find, but it's definitely not necessary. And in that same vein of knowing what you like and what your own priorities are, I would say understand the processes that you've enjoyed in school the most. Even in school, I loved Keyshot. I loved doing rendering. And so I felt like moving from a product design job to a marketing job was okay, partly because I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of rendering. And so there's a secure part of that where I kind of knew going in, I'm already going to enjoy at least a portion of this job. So find those things, whether it's a problem solving element or almost a more engineering side element. Think of, if you can't find an industrial design job, is there another job that you'd still be happy having? There are those kind of core elements that you still enjoy that are up your alley. And especially if you are having trouble locating a certain kind of job, then you may find that by getting your foot in the door in a company, later on that job opens up either at the same company or a related company that does business with the one that you've joined.
Yeah,
A lot of times that ends up being the case where you may you may develop relationships outside of that that you never would have if you hadn't joined that company in the first place.
that's true. One last question for you. If you were reviewing a student's portfolio, or they were hoping to apply to do some work for you, what's something that you would be looking for in that portfolio or in the interview that says, yeah, this student knows what they're talking about, or they're a good person to work with and I want to work with them?
Hmm. I would say for the portfolio portion, this is going to be subjective, but I look for someone. that has taste, again, that's going to be up to discretion. So
Sure.
some people's tastes are going to be different than my own, but that's part of where the environment that you're working in is going to be important. So for me, I'm working alongside two other graphic designers, and we're making packaging that has to live on a shelf next to each other.
Hmm.
If all of our taste is so different that we don't even agree on what looks good, it's really hard to agree on a set of rules that's going to bind all of us together. And so, at least for myself, if my taste, which it leans more minimalist, a little more clean cut, that's probably what I'm going to look for. And that applies to different companies as well, where there's going to be some companies that align a lot more with me and other companies which are not, where I could get a job there and I could do work, but I'm probably not going to enjoy what I'm doing. So I think there's a connection there between the person doing the interview and the person who's interviewing, getting interviewed. Um, of does your taste match up? And is there a commonality there that you can at least latch on to, even if they're different? In terms of the personal aspect, I think flexibility and humility are huge. Mm. When I was at Vault, I actually helped to hire two people to our department to replace me in jobs that I was doing that were not my main core responsibility. So I helped hire a graphic designer and a project planner. And for both of them, they were down on skills, but they were really high on personality. They got along great with everyone. And so I would say they were like 100% match on personality and like 75% on skills, maybe less, depending on the skill that we were talking about. And I think even if you don't have all of the skills for a job, it's always worth applying. And then it's always worth at least trying to get your foot in the door to talk to people, especially in person, because making that human connection can really tilt odds in your favor if you make friends with people.
You're not the first person to say that, and you're not going to be the last. We always encourage our students to apply anyway, even if they see the job listing. They say, "I don't. I only match 75% of those skills." Well, do you have 100% personality? Because that might pull its weight. Uh, Will, this has been a great conversation. It's been so encouraging to catch up to see what you're up to. Nothing has surprised me because you've always been someone who's done the best at something that I wouldn't expect, and I love that that's continuing in your career right now. Great work, great conversation. If people want to see your work, or if they want to connect with you, or if they want to see your products, where can they find out more?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and I also have a personal website as well as a product website. So I have both of those: LinkedIn, personal website, and project website.
And it seems like if I am interested in seeing any of your work, I can go to my local Lowe's or Home Depot.
That is also true. Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild because I'm positive I've walked past those things and hadn't even thought that you had worked on them. Will, thanks so much for your time. It was great chatting with you. Encouraged by the wisdom you've offered the students, and I can't wait for them to hear this presentation. Thanks for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
That's been great.